Welcome to the Book Show, a celebration of reading and writers. I'm Joe Donahue. Bestselling author Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is the author of the debut novel Chain Gang All-Stars, the story of two top women gladiators fighting for their freedom within a depraved private prison system not so far removed from America's own. Loretta Thurwar and Hamara Hurricane Stacker are the stars, the cornerstone of CAPE, or Criminal Action Penal Entertainment, a highly popular, highly controversial, profit-raising program in America's increasingly dominant private prison industry. It's the return of the gladiators, and prisoners are competing for the ultimate prize, their freedom. Chain Gang All-Stars is an excoriating look at the American prison system and its unholy alliance of systemic racism, unchecked capitalism, and mass incarceration, and a clear-eyed reckoning with what freedom is in this country and what it really means. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is the New York Times bestselling author of Friday Black. His work has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, Esquire, the Paris Review, and elsewhere. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah to this week's book show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me here today. That was an incredible introduction. I feel like I'm sitting a little bit taller right now.
Well, as well you should. You've accomplished this amazing thing. I was reading a review from Ron Charles in the Washington Post, and this is what he said: like Orwell's 1984 and Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, Adjei-Brenyah's book presents a dystopian vision so illuminating that it should permanently shift our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of doing. Those are amazing words about an amazing book. Did you ever think that there was sort of a place to write about our incarceration and penal system that could lend itself to your voice so readily?
You know, you kind of discover by doing. I guess I hoped so, but I'm also I think the kind of writer that a lot of the subjects I end up feeling most engaged in are those that are maybe a little bit beyond me. That makes sense. Those I feel like when I started, and I started about 7 years ago at this point, felt sort of impossible. But as I started to like arm myself with research and get better acquainted with the reality of the carceral system in America, I guess it felt more and more possible that I could talk about this super broad subject, but still have it be an important subject and still have it feel like something that was my kind of work.
I think anyone who reads this will see the similarities to our current system and believe that there's aspects of this that are our current system. But with that said, you've also created this entire world. You've created what this company is, who these people are, what the rules of the competition are, and that's a lot because you have set up this framework so that we understand what these characters are going through and ultimately what they're trying for.
I've been thinking about like talking about the world building, and for me, it really stems from what do my characters like? What how can I mind their business? And what I mean by that is we have the central character who's like sort of the middle C from which the other characters are tuned. She's like the main support beam, Loretta Thurwar. And in shaping the world, I just look through her eyes and what is affecting her day to day. What does she need? What are the institutions that are controlling her and limiting her or suppressing her or enhancing her? And by focusing on her, I could easily get to, okay, I need her to be both restrained, but also have the ability to move like an athlete. Okay, so I can't have her in handcuffs. I need to create these magnetic handcuffs that are embedded into her skin. And
Right.
so by thinking about those kind of decisions, what do my characters like? What is available to them? What do they see? And what shapes their life? I kind of use that as my guide, so to speak, about how to shape the world. Because I can't make everything, but I have to make what affects them particularly. And if it's something that doesn't exist in this world already, I'll take the time to really render it to the best of my ability.
Would you say that that evolved as you were writing of these
Mm.
various ideas of how things were going to work, of how they were going to travel, of what would happen when they went to a press conference, what would happen when they went to a community event?
Absolutely. I think that if you write in the, if you want to call it speculative mode or sci-fi or whatever people want to say, that's some of the fun of it. I play video games, and there's like certain some games where it's almost like a misty fog, and you don't know what the layout's going to look until you take that step, and some of that mist is lifted as like the world is rendering in front of you. You get to have that experience and create that experience, and so of course you're discovering, okay, now they're in this place. How does it look like? There is a press conference at one point, and like actually it's like low fidelity kind of situation relatively, and they're in a school for some reason because it's like a local charm somehow embedded into this super high tech blood sport, and some just making those kind of decisions. That's it feels very, I don't know if fun is the exact word, but it feels very artistically fulfilling maybe.
Yes.
And so I'm always discovering, and then I'm discovering more in revision because you write stuff down, you realize it makes no sense, and then you do it again and do it again and do it again for my case a very long time, and eventually hopefully get something that feels like it's coherent.
I would think it would be fun to create that world, and what we're talking about isn't fun because it's this system that is so horrible for those who are part of it, and yet it is also what the audience is seeing, what the audience is watching. They're watching it for fun, right? I mean, that's why
Yeah,
they're glued to their sets.
absolutely. And I think a big part of the book is you almost want the reader to feel complicit in this entertainment. You want them to feel sort of almost an ick about engaging as a audience member for some of these violences. And as a writer, I literally have to put myself in some of these perspectives of people who are enjoying the blood sport. So you have to really embrace that feeling. But for me, I kind of just attach more to the general challenges of, okay, every fight is also like a dance, sort of. And how do I choreograph this very specific arm swing in a linear form that is language or prose? And that is where I think that the challenge or entertainment or fun comes for me. But also generally, I think a core tenet of my attitude as a writer, but also I teach as well, and also my pedagogy as a professor is like that you can be engaging and intellectually serious at the same time, and that's a big part of how I think about my work and works that I like best.
Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is our guest in this week's book show, the new novel Chain Gang All Stars. It is published by Pantheon. The idea of the competition, I think at one point you used the word even performance, which is fascinating because these are people who are on the circuit, and you get an idea that there just isn't enough of it, right? That people
Hmm.
they're putting on these matches and people can't get enough of what they're seeing, and there's this whole corporation that is trying to fulfill the wants of the public by obviously using real people and real prisoners.
Yeah, and growing that sort of economic ecosystem and seeing just how like willing to do almost anything for profit these companies are is a way for me to speak really clearly about our actual for-profit prison system, which we have in America, which human beings are kept in cages and people are profiting from it.
They even have toys. I mean, there's a
Hmm.
line of toys from the All Stars of whether it be a Love Guile or a Lick 'em Split 'em, and the gladiators are actually signing them for the kids at some point. So those are all things that we are used to, and yet the end of this, in the sense of what we're ultimately trying to, of what they're working on, is killing their opponent.
Yeah, there's a there's a celebrity culture. There's a sort of fun aspect to it, but right at its core is a really, really, really deep violence. And again, that disharmony I think is a important aspect of the book because I think in American culture we have so many instances where there's something that is presented that feels honorable or beautiful or kind or generous, and right on the other side of it, there's massive death.
Yeah.
And so this is like yet another iteration of, I think, of that trend.
What was it like for you to write the violent scenes? Because you seem to do it with such a beauty and a clarity that I don't think I've ever read before. There's one line where the entrails land on the boot, and it's so vivid, and
Mm,
yet in its whole is really a beautiful set piece of the violence that's taking place, but also the artistry of
yeah.
these athletes.
Thank you. It's funny when you said the word entrails, a writer immediately came to mind, and I think he's one of the people who does violence best. I'm thinking of Cormac McCarthy. I try to be very, very specific. I try in terms of depicting the choreography of physical violence. First off, I'm a pretty squeamish person, and I think it's why I try to take. It helps me pay attention because I'm adverse to all of it. But I need it because the system I'm talking about is a violent system, and I need to almost channel that energy that I get from depicting the savagery of the death matches and reminding and connecting that visceral reaction that the reader might have to the institutions that are putting them there. But in terms of actually rendering the fights, it's all about breaking it down to almost its component parts, and it becomes like mechanical because it's really about the right foot rises, it stomps down, and as that happens, the shoulder sort of loosens from its socket, and the arm pulls back, and the weight of it follow. Like breaking it down to the component parts.
Right.
Really, 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 as minute sort of detail level as you're willing to go. And for me, it might be even to the syllable level. So it's really about breaking down all those scenes to the component parts. Of course, you'll have these sort of images like entrails or these weeping wounds on someone's skin or whatever I'll say. But I think those are sort of visual markers that help keep you grounded in what is actually a very systematic choreograph, almost like a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and just a more violent version.
They are athletes and they're very good at what they do, and as you allude to a couple of times in the novel, which is why they were good at killing people, which got them into the correction system in the first place.
They're good at it and they can do it, I think. And some people kill people circumstantially, and they suffer in the death matches because they can't do it because it's hard to kill again, and it's hard to. But some people have that ability to put that switch, and it's difficult because I think the book sort of is very clear about its argument that to harm someone else is also to harm yourself. And I think in
Right.
many ways, the characters of the book, the ones that we are closest to, are trying to maintain a sense of humanity even as they're being forced to administer this extremely inhumane violence.
And those two characters that most typify that are Thurwar and Stax. Not only are they eventually, a team and opponents, but they're a couple. They have a relationship. It's very difficult because they sort of know where all of this is headed, and yet they're trying to the best they can make this very, very dirty sport as clean as they possibly can.
Yeah, that's really their struggle. They're in a system that is inherently inhumane and trying their best to be good in it, which I think we're all doing, whether we're aware of it or not.
When it comes to them, there are voices in this book that are there to say that this is wrong, that what we're doing is unhuman, and the Coalition to End Neo Slavery is the group that you write about in the book. Those voices are there, but they really do get silenced by the screaming fans and the blood sport of it of rah rah, let's go and get this guy and get that woman.
Yeah, they're outnumbered, or at least it seems they are, in the instances we see in the book. But there's other moments where maybe that's less true. I think sometimes in doing any type of movement work, it's gonna feel perhaps that you are one against thousands, or just a few against thousands or millions, and sometimes you are the mass. I think either way, it's important to remember like with some kind of clarity, like the more ethical reality, not just what is most popular. And I think the characters in this book are focused on that, at least those who are in the more protester kind of role.
Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is the author of Chain Gang All Stars. The book is published by Pantheon. We talked about the idea and how it came to you. What kind of research then did you want to do into our penal system, into the correction system, and how that would fit into this world? I mean, obviously there is the racism, there is the violence, there is there are the questions as to who goes, the fairness of
Hmm.
incarceration that are baked in the cake, if you will, of knowing that those are part and problems within the system, but then you going further to explore how those aspects can be exploited.
Yeah, I think that there's just so many different types of there's so many different types of wrong, I guess, that are interested that the prison system sort of, I don't know, capitalizes on. In some ways, the book was me like trying to discover what I really thought. So about if I in some ways I think the book was me trying to discover if I actually was an abolitionist. I think that term kind of became part of the popular zeitgeist, especially after George Floyd was murdered. I think the book in some ways was me thinking, I think I believe in this thing. I don't think this is right, but let me really figure that out. And so in terms of research, there are some luminaries for me like Angela Davis and Ruth Wilson Gilmore and Miriam Kaba were huge. But also going to prison museums in Philadelphia and reading books by like Solitary by Albert Woodfox. And also, I work in my actual lived life with a group called the Rockland Coalition to End the New Jim Crow, and they're an advocacy group that works with the incarcerated or formerly incarcerated and tries to advocate in that realm. And so, I really got reminded of something that I think that our current carceral system really tries to make us forget, which is that these are human beings who have unalienable rights, which is again the important, an important term and would be true whether or not it was ever put in a document. It's something that I think that we as humans have to decide is true, whether or not anyone said it, but unalienable rights. So why would we have a system that literally reduces them to slaves, as we know our current constitution does? As I think was made famous by the film, the 13th Amendment. So it was doing that kind of research and kind of internally, really, truly believing, you know what, I don't think this is right. And then, of course, learning about the specifics, learning about the actual inefficacy, learning that prisons actually don't work. If their goal is rehabilitation, they don't do that. If the goal is deterrence, they also don't do that. They also are failures in their own terms, let alone the more ethical atrocity that they are.
We are in a fictional world here in your novel, but the footnotes really give us what you were just talking about, those statistics, those ideas of what really is and what has happened and how we have gotten to where we
Hmm.
are, and the numbers and the steps forward and the steps backward.
Yeah, like I said, like I believed in the idea of abolition, but I also went to like I sometimes you want to understand like the context. I think the history and the facts and figures just create a sharper picture, a more vivid picture in your mind's eye. And so when I started really doing the research, I discovered just how racist, unequivocally, the carceral system is, how women suffer differently and sometimes in worse ways than men, how the LGBTQIA plus community is particularly targeted, how the trans community is particularly targeted, just statistically as facts. I discovered that some of the clearest markers, or probably the clearest markers of the people who might be incarcerated, are those who suffer from severe mental health issues, those who suffer from drug addiction or substance addictions, and those who are impoverished. And so, we have this system that allows us to not address these serious and massive social ills because instead of viewing these people compassionately or as human, and I really do think prison even like fundamentally reduces our capacity to do so. We take those who are suffering from severe mental health issues, who have substance abuse problems, and who are poor, and throw them in a cage.
You write about Thurwar. Her success legitimized something in their mind. She killed, they loved her better, and she hated them more deeply. That's the equation, and it's difficult, really, for both parties, isn't it?
Yeah, and Thurwar is a particular type of person, which that same section I think kind of speaks to a little bit. I think she had to be the star of this book because there's a particular way in which women, but in particular Black women, are both loved and hated in the same breath, both respected but disregarded, stomped on but rise, but like cheered on. I think of Serena Williams and how her experience as like maybe the greatest ever in her sport is also filled with all types of forms of disrespect. And so Thurwar, who is the central character of this book, really experiences that complexity of existence as someone who is finding success in this harsh system, but is also suffering from the realities that come with her personal identity.
You say in the novel, in the center of the complicated nexus of adored and hated, desired, but also easy to watch destroyed, it had to
Mm,
be a Black woman.
exactly.
So while you have Thurwar, who we've discussed, we also have, as I mentioned, her partner, who is Stax. And Stax really has been through this system for a very long time, and yet seems very clear eyed as to what's going on.
Yeah, she's sort of the soul or maybe the heart, I guess, of the book. She's a part of it. She understands her job. She's a great athlete because in some ways the success could be reduced to people who have just great athletic instincts. But she believes that people are at their core good. I think she believes that we are all good and we all have a great capacity for love and goodness. And I think that is like her north star, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. I think she understands that she and all of us are in a system that reduces us to from that like ideal that we could have, and she moves with like the expectation that we can rise to our best nature, and so she ends up feeling like to me like the heart and really one of my favorite characters I've ever written.
I was amazed, and obviously we won't. I'm not going to give anything away, I promise. But I was amazed by the ending because you have done something that I don't remember having being done in a long, 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 long time, and that is you don't know what the hell happens until the last four words.
Yeah, it's and it was tough. Again, I also try to keep it unspoilered.
Sure,
But it's
but
really tough. It was tough to do it.
yeah, I mean, there's no afterward. There's no explanation as to what happens after. It's that this is what happens, and then we're done. And I thought, man, that's a mic drop, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
just incredible.
You want to know something? I think shout out to my editor Naomi Gibbs. I almost did a epilogue because I
Really.
was kind of like feeling like like this is kind of intense, but it ended up feeling right.
And now I assume you couldn't imagine it ending any other way.
Yeah, I couldn't. Now I know it's what it had to be, but there was a time where I was like,
Did
yeah.
you have those? Was that a regular feeling in writing the book of
Oh
going
yeah.
back and forth as to, oh, is this what's right here?
Yeah, because the book is pretty. There's a lot of brutality in it, and I like you kind of fall in love with the characters.
Yeah.
Like I said, Sax probably my favorite, but my other favorite besides Thurwar is probably Hendrik Singer Young, and because the book is about a system that facilitates great suffering and death, I it's unavoidable that they will suffer greatly, but sometimes it was really difficult to do that. But I had to kind of follow the will of the story and not just my own like sort of personal squeamishness or sadness.
I mentioned the post review, and those are books that really have gotten us to think about societal issues. And where are we, do you think, as far as our openness to talk about our criminal justice system and how we make it better, fairer, and
Yeah.
And a more just system.
I think that we're in a pretty interesting place in time where, like I said, the word abolition is even in the cultural zeitgeist, which is new for me in my lifetime. Anyways, I'm 32, and so that's important and that's impressive and that's cool. I also think that there's a sort of shallow appreciation of what that word means because it is kind of a fundamental reimagining of a lot of not only structures but our sort of, I think, even interpersonal attitudes. Sometimes I feel discouraged, I guess, because I think about 1984 and the reality of how surveillance has become now,
Right.
and there's, I mean, a myriad of issues that still plague women in so many aspects of our culture and cultures abroad. When I think about Handmaid's Tale, I do think that I think that culturally we have this we just haven't let go of this idea that the eye for eye thing, in the really simple terms, we haven't let go of, like, we should cause suffering to those who cause suffering. We think it's a deterrent because it's simple and it's easy, but these issues are complex. They take nuance, and the thing when you just throw humans in cage is not solving them. And so but I do have some hope that, like, I think we've almost like our attitude towards the death penalty has changed, and I wanted to change further, but there's always someone who can get you riled up about someone who did something terrible, and then some state will double down on the death penalty to show some moral uh, abhorrence to someone doing X crime. But it's really, to me, it's the poison that is drinking poison to hope that you destroy your enemy. And so I don't know. I think it's a complex question. Like, in my heart of hearts, I do think that we can change, like, really deeply. I don't, and I think that if my work could be one small drop in that bucket, I'd be really proud and more than excited.
Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah's new novel is Chain Gang All Stars. It is published by Pantheon. Thank you so much for being with us. What a pleasure to have you on the program. Congratulations on just a magnificent book and great work.
Thank you. Truly, it's been my pleasure.
Again, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah's new novel is Chain Gang All Stars. It is published by Pantheon. Thanks to our producer, Sarah LeDuc. Write to us at book@wamc.org. The latest on National Productions programs available via the Airwaves newsletter at wamc.org and on social media at WAMC Radio. Bookmark us for